You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 23rd of June 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Briefing is brought to you in association with ADIS. Hello there and a very warm welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio 5 here at 16 Rue Bachaumont in Paris. I'm Emma Nelson, and coming up on today's programme.
The world must not forget that it was the United States which, in the midst of a process to forge a diplomatic outcome, betrayed diplomacy.
Tehran mulls its next move after vowing to retaliate for the US strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. What could it do? Also ahead in the next 30 minutes, a view from Paris as Europe plays the role of spectator in this weekend's developments. We'll examine if in some quiet corners there's been celebration. Plus how cheap labour is costing the reputation of champagne dearly. We'll have the latest as the CEO of Prada steps down, and hear how when it comes to perfume and tailoring, Paris is still the beating heart. That's all coming up right here on The Briefing with me, Emma Nelson. What happened on Saturday night when the US launched devastating attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities now has a name. Operation Hammer was launched from Missouri in the US, and after several in-flight refuelings and more than one decoy, US bombers were in Iranian airspace for just 25 minutes, during which time they destroyed, for now, Iran's nuclear ambitions. So what does happen now? There are conflicting messages coming out of the US. The US Defense Secretary saying they're not seeking regime change in Tehran. The President suggesting something different. Well, with me now is Thomas Chatterton-Williams, staff writer at The Atlantic, based here in Paris, and also Alexandre Kouchner, who's journalist and political analyst based in Paris. Very good afternoon to you. Bonjour, gentlemen.
Bonjour.
Very good to have you with us. Thomas, let me begin with you. Do we get the sense that the United States knew what it was doing on Saturday night?
That's the question that still hasn't been answered. Certainly the military understood what it was doing operationally, but we still don't know what the effect of the campaign was. It's been quite concerning to realize that 9 to 10 bombs worth of enriched uranium have gone missing, and there's no telling when we'll have an assessment of what the nuclear capacity remains. So this is kind of the madman theory of international relations that we're learning on the fly. And
when we're learning on the fly as well, the fact that the US Defense Secretary says they're not seeking regime change. But what has Donald Trump said in the last 24 hours that might suggest that this isn't, that they are still, again, on the fly trying to work up something which, for so long, so many other American presidents have done everything they can to avoid direct military action?
That's right. Statecraft by tweet and truth on Truth Social is a new world. The president truthed yesterday a new phrase, "Make Iran great again," MEGA, and that seems to contradict the policy that the vice president and others in the U.S. government have been saying, that we're not seeking regime change. So we don't know what the policy is, and that's kind of a scary place to be right now. Let me bring you in, Thomas.
Sitting in Paris, and you get very much the impression that Europe is the spectator in this. So, Alex, tell me a little bit more about what the reaction has been to something which, in many ways, Europe cannot do anything about, nor, dare I say, some parts might not wish to want to get involved here.
Well, whether they wish it or not, the truth is they can't. There's nothing they can do. They're not united. They do not have the might to do so. And one gets the sense that they are trying to make their policy on the fly as well. The only problem is they're called the European Union, and they're not really in any way unified. You have the Chancellor Merz from Germany, who stated that the US and Israel were doing the dirty business, and I quote, on behalf of the rest of the world. Well, you have President Macron urging, for diplomacy and for the situation not to spiral out of control. The reality is, it seems that right now, Europe is an irrelevant partner to both parties.
Indeed, and when you just look at what happened in discussions on Friday, it is about 3 days since we saw the French, the British, the German diplomats in Geneva with the Iranian foreign minister talking about negotiations coming to the table. The way that things have stepped up in the last 72 hours seem to sort of push them to the side in terms of their relevance as well. I mean, how dangerous an idea is it that, as you say, Europe can't do anything, and it could actually find itself powerless yet at the receiving end of the consequences?
Well, what's even more troubling is that since they do not have the military might to weigh in these sort of imperial wars that we're seeing pop out everywhere around the world, the fact that they seem to be abandoning the rule of law and this idea, though fragile as it is, that there are rules, that there are systems that they've been put in place, and that they're not perfect, and yes, they take time, but one should try at least to settle, these matters in a diplomatic way. If Europe cast aside that idea, then it has nothing left, because clearly on the battlegrounds, they don't matter yet. Maybe they might. Germany is allegedly about to spend a potload of money on military actions, but so far, if Europe casts aside the international rule of law, then they're casting themselves aside.
And this is something that there are fears that the United States is already casting aside. I mean, the on-the-fly description of the way that the US makes up its foreign policy is one way of putting it. Some people are suggesting that actually that the United States didn't have the legal surety, the certainty actually to do what it did on Saturday, that domestic rules are being broken here.
Well, that's one of the very concerning things to any American citizen, is that as the United States takes on special military operations abroad, or whatever they want to call it, there is increasing authoritarianism at home, and it's completely unclear, and it seems to be the case that it was not constitutional for the president to unilaterally decide to take action without congressional approval. And so we are imposing this kind of madman theory of international relations, but at the same time it's eroding the solidity of the American liberal democracy domestically.
And it was interesting to see that one of the initial reactions from Tehran was accusations that the United States had broken international law. And this was not a sort of this was a statement appealing to the higher values that should, in theory, govern how things are done.
That's right. And it doesn't just undermine Europe's role in the world, but it becomes very difficult to have the moral high ground or make the case that Russia can't do things in Ukraine and that China doesn't have a right to move on Taiwan. So it's actually a very reckless way of conducting great power politics that Donald Trump is subjecting us all to.
Alex, what's the reaction from Europe to the way that things are being done?
Well, there's a bit of dismay about being an irrelevant partner, and despite all these calls for more diplomacy, what's also very hard to completely understand is this complete flip side of things. As you rightfully said, Iran calling for the United States to actually, respect international law, just like China was actually asking the United States to keep, goods flowing by quoting Ronald Reagan. I mean, this inversion of values is difficult to fathom, but Europe being Europe, it's boasting its voice, hoping it can be heard. I'm old enough to remember what happened before the Iraqi war, when Europe, through France in a way, at the table at the UN was actually, asking people for some more restraint, and this didn't work out. So as you rightfully said, now that diplomacy is done on Twitter, through means that are not clear, with means that are not clear, and with an end game that, quite frankly, is not clear either, the view is, let's try something and know that it won't work.
There's a few theories knocking around in the last couple of days that although there has been universal condemnation and urges, parties urging restraint from all sides, there will be some in Europe who won't really mind too much about what happened this weekend in Iran. The suggestion being twofold. Well, first and foremost, the European Union, Germany, France, have been instrumental in trying to stop the nuclear program in Iran for a very, very long time. They just did it through negotiation and peaceable means. So whether you consider it a means to an end, the end has been rather abruptly achieved this Saturday night. But also there are those who are saying that actually indirectly if you take Iran out, you take out one of Russia's great friends. Iran supplying Russia with armaments, being one of the great friends in Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Does this actually inadvertently or indirectly boost Europe? Who wants to have a go at that one first?
I'm not entirely convinced, to be honest, for two reasons. The first one is that I don't think Iran has many friends right now. Russia and Iran were supposed to be friends. Russia is not really putting much of an effort in favor of Iran, despite calling for restraint. Iran doesn't seem to be extremely mighty right now. We've seen videos and infuriating clips for 20 years. It seems that the regime is not as strong as it seems. So Iran might not be the strongest friend of Russia. And I'm more worried about sort of the medium term, which is, again, if we apply double standards, if we decide to go over international law, if we decide that might is right, then Europe and the West in general might not have many friends in the long run as well. We're seeing already how double standards between Ukraine and Gaza have been very much undermining the stand and the asks of the European Union and the West in general. So if we just let this fly, then I'm not so sure in the medium range we're actually gaining any more power and more friends.
Thomas, your take on it?
Well, the Iranian regime is very difficult to have sympathy for, so a lot of countries are probably very privately glad that it's been set back and that its weaknesses as a conventional military have been exposed. I'm certain that many of the Arab neighbors privately feel that way, and it's a good thing if there's one less fundamentalist, ideologically motivated actor on the world stage close to nuclear weapons. But my main concern is that with friends or without friends, Iran is now in a position where it must fast track to trying to get the weapon as a means of survival, and we don't know where the missing enriched uranium has gone.
Thomas Chatterton-Williams, staff writer at The Atlantic, and Alexandre Kouchnel, journalist and political analyst, both based in Paris. Thank you so much for joining me in Studio 5. The time here in Paris is 12 minutes past 13:12. A quick summary now of the day's other news headlines, going back to London for the latest from Tom Edwards. Tom.
Thanks, Emma. Thailand's government will push ahead with a cabinet reshuffle this week. This follows Prime Minister Shinawat's perceived mishandling of a border row with Cambodia, including over a leaked phone call with the country's former leader, Hun Sen. Firefighters on the Greek island of Chios are battling to tame wildfires for a second day. Some 190 emergency services, assisted by 6 aircraft, have been trying to contain the blaze, which has been fanned by strong winds. And Tesla has launched self-driving taxis in Austin, Texas. A small number of the cars carried paying passengers for the first time on Sunday. CEO Elon Musk called it the culmination of a decade of hard work and said Tesla built its AI chips and software all in-house. Those are some of the stories we're following this hour. Back to you and the team in Paris. Emma.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom. And if you listen very carefully, you might even hear the odd rumbling of the metro beneath us. That proves that we're here. Right, let's move on to some breaking news that's coming out of Italy this afternoon. The CEO of Prada is to step down. After 2.5 years at the helm, Gianfranco Dattis will leave by mutual agreement in just a week. Well, Monocle's fashion director, Natalie Theodosi, joins us on the line from Milan. Good afternoon, Natalie.
Good afternoon, Emma.
So the news coming out of Milan, the city of Prada, what's been the reaction like?
It's interesting because the news broke just as the Giorgio Armani show was happening, and what everyone is just talking about is that the news cycle has never been so fast in the industry. I've worked in the industry for a decade. Were people sitting next to me at the show with much more experience, and everyone was just saying that they've never seen so many hiring and firings all at the same time happening across the industry, both in the creative departments and also the C-suite.
Why is he gone?
You know what? There hasn't been much clarity aside from the statement confirming that he is leaving. But what is different in this case is that Prada is in a position of strength at the moment, is one of the few companies that finds itself in a position of strength. So it wasn't a case of being pushed out for not delivering or being under pressure to rebrand, to turn the company around, which is what we've seen in companies like Gucci, all across Kering, and in some brands at LVMH. So it might have been more of a personal reason, I would say. And also there is Andrea Guerra, the group CEO, who can easily step in. And of course, Lorenzo Bertelli, Miuccia Prada's son, who has been groomed for the position and has been preparing for a while. So maybe this is his moment to finally step in.
Indeed, and it was going pretty well for Prada. I mean, they acquired Versace earlier on this year. Well, it's on its way. So there seems to be. I mean, he as you say, Datis is leaving Prada in fine shape.
Exactly, it's one of the few cases that we've seen of living on a high. Prada and Miu Miu have seen incredible sales increases, and consistent ones in the last few years, at a time when across the board, we've seen a big slowdown of luxury consumption, and CEOs, designers leaving their jobs for not delivering very fast turnarounds. So I think it's not as dramatic news as in previous cases, and I will be quite curious to see if this is a moment that Bertelli Jr. finally steps into the CEO position.
Natalie, you've just come out of a show. How is Milan Men's Fashion Week at the moment?
It's been great. It's been a slightly slower week because the likes of Gucci, Fendi, JW Anderson have been absent from the schedule. But at the same time, we've had more time to explore presentations by some of the Italian heritage houses like Brioni, Canali, Zegna, which have, I think, they've been taking a slower approach to growth. They're still family run, and it's been paying off for them. You see very dedicated customer bases and product that every season keeps becoming better and better quality-wise. And Giorgio Armani, the show that I've just seen, it was beautiful, and everyone, I think, has a renewed appreciation for Mr. Armani and his sense of consistency and kind of exacting vision of luxury.
Indeed, the man who invented understated luxury himself. He's 91 next week. And Natalie Theodosi will let you get back to your afternoon in Milan. That was our fashion director, Natalie Theodosi. You're listening to The Briefing live from Paris. And you're back with The Briefing on Monocle Radio, live from Studio 5 here in Paris. It's me, Emma Nelson, behind the microphone. And here in France, a court case involving the exploitation of migrant workers has drawn a very ugly picture of one of France's jewels, that of Champagne. Illegal immigrants working as fruit pickers were often going unpaid and not given food or water to sustain them. Well, with me now in the studio is a Paris-based journalist, Colette Davidson. Welcome back to Studio 5. Good to see you, Colette.
Good to see you too. Hi, Emma.
Very good to look at this story now. I mean, it's been dominating the headlines for the past few weeks and months. There's going to be another case similar to this in November. So just outline what's been happening, please.
Yeah, so this is a case involving human trafficking, among other charges. There are 3 people who are accused of exploiting 57 workers. They're mostly from West Africa. They were found by a local resident to be living in cramped conditions, no clean water, rotten food. Some of the people who have testified said the situation wasn't even fit for animals. And because they're all undocumented migrants, they don't have any papers and they don't have any support. So, authorities are looking at their living conditions, but also their working conditions. They're claiming that they worked 10 hours a day with a 30-minute lunch break, getting a frozen sandwich for those 30 minutes, no written contract. They were transported in the back of trucks. So this is what authorities are going to be looking at.
And this is something that clearly goes absolutely against the reputation of Champagne. Is when you drink the product, there is arguably an inherent sense of elegance. And this is the the absolute opposite.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, this is what this case is all about, is looking at the wider implications of what this case really means and what the industry knew. The majority of the industry uses agencies, middlemen, to hire their workers. So this is a €6 billion industry. It relies on some upwards of 120,000 seasonal laborers each year. So the question really is, how much did the industry know about these practices? The Comité Champagne, it's one of the main groups that represents champagne producers. They're saying that this case is rare. It doesn't represent, the majority, but they do recognize the damage that has been done. They're calling it unacceptable. Meanwhile, trade unions are saying that champagne houses need to lose their label if this, illegal practice is taking place.
Indeed, because people trafficking is notoriously difficult to trace in terms of blame, responsibility, and bringing the right people to the courthouse. Do we know that, if the suspects are convicted, that any punishment that they could receive could actually act as a chilling effect on discouraging others to do the same?
Absolutely. I think because it's so secretive, we haven't known so much about it until now. We actually have names. The name of this recruitment agency was called Anavim. It was run by a 44-year-old woman from Kyrgyzstan. And there are 2 associates also being named in the case. And these are big charges. We're talking human trafficking, undeclared labor, employing foreigners without permits, inadequate pay. So they're facing jail time of 2 to 4 years. Some are even citing 7 years in the press, and fines of upwards of €200,000. So yes, this definitely could be a wake-up call to others.
And it's a wake-up call also to the industry, because although you might be able to, on a very, very local level, hide an immediate problem, if this is going to expose something wider, what are the implications for the champagne industry, whose reputation will be very rapidly dragged down by this?
Oh, absolutely. And it's not the first case either. So they're going to deal with a reputational problem going forward. In 2023, when this case is, it's referring back to the 2023 season, there were also 6 grape pickers who died of heat stroke in the Champagne and Beaujolais regions. There have been 2 other cases in recent years regarding, mistreatment of migrant workers. So this is something that is coming up again and again, and the industry is going to have to face it unless they want to have a serious reputational problem.
Colette Davidson, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. You're listening to The Briefing. We're live on Monocle Radio from Paris. Last week, the UAE played host to a prestigious group of global policymakers, planners and city leaders shaping the cities of tomorrow. They were all gathering for the inaugural edition of the Abu Dhabi Infrastructure Summit, unpacking everything from building inclusive neighbourhoods to climate-resilient design, mobility solutions and even destination development. Monocle's editor-in-chief was in attendance to find out how Abu Dhabi is turning big ideas into reality. And one of the people he heard from was his excellent Maysara Mahmoud Aid, who's the Director General of the Abu Dhabi Projects and Infrastructure Centre, the hosts of the summit. Andrew began by asking him what the motivation behind this inaugural summit was.
The main aim of this summit to showcase what we do have in Abu Dhabi. We do have a massive portfolio when it comes to capital projects development. We do have a revolution when it comes to infrastructure development and upgrades in the Emirates. And to do so and to develop in the best practices and to the standards that we are aiming for, we need to collaborate, with international companies, international visions to adopt it in our execution strategy. In our opinion, as Abu Dhabi government and in particular Abu Dhabi Projects and Infrastructure Center, we cannot do things alone without the private sector. The private sector is very important and we need to bring a new blood to Abu Dhabi who has different perspectives, different cultures. This will ensure that what we are developing suits everybody in Abu Dhabi. We do have in Abu Dhabi more than 190 nationalities. So to deliver the best facilities, the best standards for a city which is livable and lovable, as our chairman said, We need to bring experts from different cultures, from different regions to work closely with us.
It's interesting, those two words you say, livable and lovable as well. I think they're really important words when you think about being urban designers. And fascinating here, you have people who are building theme parks, who are building places for hospitality. That's also interesting about this event, that you are putting a focus on these softer sides of building a city. Often people would think about an infrastructure event and they would think it would be about bridges and roads. You're looking at a holistic vision.
Infrastructure in our vision and in our way of doing things, it's a way to upscale livability, people's lives, has a direct impact even on their social interaction. So we cannot just build the places that will not serve the people who are living here. We need to build places that people really utilize, that touch their feelings, that helps them to be more social, to be more interactive, to have a livable city. From schools, as an example. When we build a schools, we are not just building a structure. The aim of building the school to welcome the new students, even the new people who's coming to UAE, to have an upgraded and internationally standard school that they can enjoy and they can have a quality education. When we talk about healthcare, it's not also about having just a hospital or a clinic. It's about helping the people to upscale their healthy lifestyle. By the end of the day, we do have clinics here, the operations as well. It's focusing on a healthier lifestyle instead of medication. So when we'll talk about infrastructure, we need to create a value. We cannot spend budgets on developments that will just be so static. It should interact with the people who are staying here, from citizens, from residents, even for tourists. You know, the cultural destinations and the tourism destination that we are building in Abu Dhabi, it supports the future generations in how to think. It will even escalate the tourism landscape in the Emirate in terms of having multiple attractions on multiple offerings.
What's fascinating is that Abu Dhabi is not at the beginning of this journey. You've done many interesting things for many, many years. So it's a two-way dialogue that you've got lessons also now to offer the world about how you develop in a way that is engaging with the environment in a hot country. You've thought about shade, you've thought about how you add in walkability and cycling even in an intense climate. Are you hoping that in the future this is something you begin to export to the world as well?
Definitely. Now in Abu Dhabi, when we talk about cycling, we are leading in the region. We are building 2,750 kilometers of cycling tracks by the next year, 2026. So this massive network, it's impacting the people's lives, more healthier lifestyle. At the same time, we are ready to export these ideas to the region, even if it's not internationally. I can assure you in Abu Dhabi, we are adopting the best standards when it comes to development, even on the contractual relation, which in my point of view is the facilitator for everything. We are adopting the best standards. We are the best in the region when it comes to contracts, our relations with the developers and the contractors. So best practices in terms of developing a new innovative ideas like modular construction. We developed a national housing villa in 1 month, completely from design to handover. And we are adopting this technology in all of our housing and social infrastructure projects, as well as the cooled walkways. We are coming with innovative solutions based on passive and active cooling to help the people enjoy Abu Dhabi during different climates. So such expertise, definitely at some point of time, which is not so far, will be ready to export it even to the region, if not internationally.
I was fascinated by what you said about the modular building. Tell me, what are the benefits for Abu Dhabi? I presume that it means that you can construct much of the housing unit in a factory, in a shaded, cooled environment. You don't have to have workers on site in the heat all year round.
This is very important when it comes to the well-being of the laborers in Abu Dhabi, as well as in the environmental part. Why? Because we are developing everything on a closed environment in a factory, then you are transporting it to the site. You will have minimal wastage when it comes to construction material, which will be less harm on the environment. You need less labor to be working under the sun because everything will be under controlled environment, as well as the delivery time will play a big role in finalizing and delivering the national housing needs for Abu Dhabi. By the end of the day, there are a lot of families who are depending on us to receive their homes. So providing them with a modular construction concept, which proven to be best in quality, because you're going to avoid any less quality in workmanship outside because everything will be done off-site. And at the same time, you're going to give them their home at a very short period of time.
And that was His Excellency Maysara Mahmoud Aid, the Director General of ADPIC, in conversation with Monocle's Editor-in-Chief, Andrew Tuck, at the Abu Dhabi Infrastructure Summit. To hear more from this event, listen to the latest edition of The Urbanist at monocle.com. It's probably not escaped your attention that it's Menswear Fashion Week here in Paris, and so the spotlight is very much on what France's capital can be proud of in terms of tailoring, its heritage and also its ability to endure. Well, one superlative example of this is Figare. For almost 6 decades it has been crafting shirts, the cut, the material and the understated chic of their work being absolutely unmistakable. Well, joining me now in Studio 5 is Eleonore Baudry, who's President of Figare Paris. Good morning, good afternoon, I should say. Bonjour, Eleonore.
Good afternoon, bonjour.
Good to have you with us. Tell us the story very briefly of Figare.
Yes, sure. So Figare is, as you mentioned, a French heritage branch which was created in 1968, actually in the city of Biarritz, and then moved to Paris very rapidly and specialized in shirts for men and women. As you mentioned, we embody French style, classic style, and quality and craftsmanship. And we have 32 stores in France, Belgium, and Switzerland since 1 month now, and a website, of course.
It's interesting that you mentioned the fact that, Biarritz is not necessarily the place that you might find a work shirt. No. It's a little warm for that. Yeah. So good that it transferred to Paris. But now that you're having your international branches, you mentioned you've got one in Brussels and now in Geneva. Yeah. That clearly suggests that there is actually a very urgent appetite for what you do.
Yeah, actually, I think shirting is becoming very important for the way women and men are dressing right now. And also the fact that we are now specializing in shirts, which are not only work shirts, but I mean, the COVID has been difficult for many brands, but it has also helped us understand that we needed to create all kinds of shirts. And now we are really specializing in shirts, but also like linen, denim, etc. So these are shirts that you can wear every day for whatever, whichever environment you work in.
That little whoops there from Eleonore was her headphones trying to make a break for the door. Tell us a little bit more though about, you mentioned COVID. It's always something that often becomes a kind of ground zero for menswear, doesn't it? Because everything arguably got a little bit casual. Mm-hmm. And then I think we saw in Petit Mormo last week in Florence that there is this love for menswear and for tailoring, the likes of which we haven't seen for a very, very long time. What are people asking from when they come through your door? What do they want nowadays?
I totally agree, because I was in Florence as well, because we have a stand at Petit Uomo, and I was impressed. And when I came back in Paris, I was like, okay, so people don't actually dress like this every day in Paris. But it's certain that there is an appetite for really getting dressed again, which we are seeing in our stores. For example, we have much higher demand for ceremony shirts with col cassé, and also we are selling ties again, which after COVID we felt we would never sell ties again, but we actually do.
And now when you look at the way that the modern dresser comes in, obviously you're saying you're looking for occasion shirts, mm-hmm. ties are coming in, people obviously want to be pulled in and show up in the way that they look, but the appetite of, let's say, the father of someone coming in to Le Figaro is right. The style will have changed, or are you indeed seeing now a nostalgia for the slightly more tailored, sharper shirts of the 50s, 60s, 70s?
Yeah, you're right. So we have launched this season. We have a collection called Beau Tissu, and it's also we model some of the models on our vintage shirts, and we see really a discrepancy. And actually, the same customer will be able to buy either a col anglais with a very vintage fabric that we will have, that will stem from our archive, and in the same time a denim shirt. And I think there's an appetite for as always, mixing, but that we see also in shirts. And indeed, we are very much working with vintage fabrics right now as well.
And the men and women who make these shirts, there is, every time you come to Paris, there is always this urgency, the respect for tradition, the respect for skills, and the transmission of these skills. Mm-hmm. Where are you getting your next generation of tailors to come in and ensure that Figueres isn't just here for 50 years, that the men and the women who are buying their shirts now will be able to hand that down in another generation's time?
You mean in terms of clients or in terms of
let's look at both. So look, just briefly, let's talk about the people who work with you.
Yeah.
I mean, where do you find a world-class tailor nowadays in Paris?
Actually, we have a lot of partners we are working with, and they are in charge of finding us the next talents. And for our talents in Paris, all of my bureau de style, there is really an appetite for style today. So we are not lacking great talents in Paris.
And it is a teaching of codes. It's a transmission of codes.
Yeah.
Eleonore Baudry, thank you so much for joining us in Studio 5. That was the president of Figueres Paris.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now we may be in the centre of Paris, you can still hear the metro rumbling underneath me, but today's final guest is transporting us all to the hills above Nice, to Grasse in particular. Aurélien Guichard is the only perfumer in the world to own, plant, harvest and use his own ingredients. He's from Matières Premières, he's the co-founder, and I'm delighted to say he joins me. A very good afternoon to you. Hello, Aurélien.
Hello, Emma.
Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Matières Premières, tell us a little about your brand.
Well, first, matière première means raw material in French. And I've been working as a perfumer for the past 25 years. And I wanted to create a brand that was coming with a different olfactive take. And I had many friends of mine who were not wearing fragrances anymore. When I was asking them why, most of them were saying they all smelled the same, they were sweet, fruity, and they couldn't really feel happy about wearing perfume in general, and there was something cool for them not to wear a perfume.
This is a terrible state of affairs in France, and especially in Grasse, which is the beating heart of perfume, isn't it? To be told that no one wants to wear perfume anymore, that must be a death blow.
Well, I wouldn't say no one, but I would say I had a few of those cool friends who were saying, I'm not wearing perfumes. And those same friends would come and visit me in my lab in the south of France or in Paris, and we would smell raw materials. And they would love raw materials. So there was like a disconnection between the fact that they would love a raw material, but they wouldn't like perfumes, probably because they were perfumes are overly complex, or they wouldn't feel the texture and the beauty of a simple raw material. So I decided to create Matières Premières by just turning an ingredient into a perfume in a very minimalistic way.
You see, that sounds incredibly simple, but I suspect it's probably quite a complicated thing to do. So give me an example of one raw material, Matières Premières, and tell us how you managed to take that from whatever you were growing and harvesting and turning it into something that someone would be absolutely delighted to spray in the nape of their neck.
Well, the example that I can give you is we grow our own rose centifolia in Grasse. So it's a very specific rose, and we grow it ourselves. Now, people don't necessarily know that, but a raw material is a formula already given by nature. It's very complex. It has multiple facets. And usually perfumers put a drop of it in a fragrance just to give a facet, a complexity, but they don't necessarily use it as an overdose. Now, the issue when you use an overdose is you have to deal with the good sides and the bad sides.
An overdose is what? When you just use that one fragrance? Or
when you just use that one ingredient in a huge quantity, like it hasn't been done before. Now, when you do that, you have to deal with the good sides and the bad sides, but you have also to turn it into a perfume so that when you wear it, it diffuses well, it's nice on skin, and it's not overwhelming. And the whole challenge is to preserve the beauty of the original product itself when it comes from nature. So when in my formulation, when I say overdose this ingredient, I will put a huge quantity of it. And it's amazing because people don't necessarily know that, but when you dip a blotter into an absolute, the fragrance of the ingredient will last for days and days. Now, because of money or because of quantities, it will have more or less an impact on the final result of the perfume. So my goal is just to preserve the beauty, but just a couple of facets around this main ingredient so that it's nice to wear and people give you comments on it.
Now you're a 7th generation perfumer, Aurélien. I mean, how have you seen the world of perfume change? I mean, we started off with a problem. We started off with too sickly, too sweet, too ubiquitous, a little bit too everywhere. And now we are going into sort of hyper focus. Is this now the beginning of a new welcome era of perfume when people do actually concentrate on, in the same way that you do what you do?
Yeah, I think people want to understand what they wear. They want to understand what they buy, and they want to, they don't need to be told what's good and what's not good or how to wear perfume. They want to, I think there's a universal capacity to appreciate what's nice. It's a bit like when you do your food shopping. Anyone around the world is capable of saying, does that raw material or that product is good or not. So, when we create a fragrance like Radical Rose, we just use a huge quantity of natural rose that we produce, and we think that people are capable of appreciating this simplicity, which is a kind of sophistication.
Do people appreciate the hard work as well? Because one droplet of rose essence is not quite the same as bucket loads of rose petals.
I think so, yes. I think also we live in a more and more digitalized world. So when you come back to things that are rooted, who have a meaning, where there's people working around it, where there's local know-how, I think it's something people appreciate today. And it's probably what luxury is today, is access to raw materials.
And you're bringing matières premières to Paris now, aren't you?
Yes, we are. We've just opened a store at 306 Rue Saint-Honoré in Paris. So it's a first store where people can experience, of course, the fragrance that we create, but also the raw materials that are in it, so that they see the connection between the main raw material and the perfume itself.
Aurélien Guichard, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for coming into Studio 5. That's all the time we have for today's edition of The Briefing, live from Paris. The warmest of thanks to all my guests, and also to the producer Tom Webb and our studio manager Mariella Bevan. The Briefing's back tomorrow at the same time. We'll be hosting the Daily live from Studio 5 here in Paris from 1900 Paris time. Hope you can join me for that for then. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.